Hamish, you've recently disclosed that Alibaba is an investment of the firm and it's in our top 5 holdings. Maybe talk us through some of the rationale for that investment.
Well, at the end of the day, Frank, we're looking for very high quality businesses that are supported by some very long-term growth dynamics behind them. And actually Alibaba ticks a number of boxes of thematics. First of all would be consumption growth in China. We have a number of investments that are aimed at that emerging middle class or upper middle class in China. They could be Starbucks, LVMH, which is a Louis Vuitton business, and now Alibaba. Why is the consumption growth story so important in China? You have to think about the pyramid of that sort of 1.2 to 1.3 billion people in China. It's estimated there may be 300 million people who are defined by income to be in the middle class. Maybe there's 600 people who are to 700 million who are urbanised at the moment, but 300 of those urbanised people are sitting inside the middle class. The total consumption growth in China is growing at 8 or 9% per annum. The estimates we see is the forecast increase of people who have middle class incomes is forecast to double over the next decade. That is 300 to 600 million people. That has actually been driven by urbanisation and the effects of urbanisation in the creation of wealth. It's estimated nearly 30 million people move from rural into cities each year in China. So that would kind of tell you about another 300 million over a decade. If you look at that, what is the growth in the value of that middle class consumption over a decade? That would be 7.5% per annum. As you start moving up this pyramid of incomes, it's estimated what is really known as the sort of the more affluent middle class. It's estimated the income brackets there may be 50 million people in that class who are going up the income pyramid. That is forecast over the next decade to maybe increase to 200 million people. That is an increase of 4 times or 15% per annum. So people who can consume up the channel of more valuable goods is growing maybe 15% per annum over a decade. And if you look at the very top of the pyramid, the sort of affluent consumer, not the middle class, but the true affluent, maybe that's around 10 million. People may say it's around 12 million consumers at an income bracket who could buy a Mercedes and that type of thing at the moment, that sort of very luxury sort of goods. It's forecast that that side of the economy may go up 6-fold from maybe 10 to 60 million people. That's a growth at 20% per annum. So what is Alibaba? First of all, it's focused on consumption. They have the largest e-commerce platform in China as its main business. They have 2 big platforms. One's called Taobao and the other's called Tmall. It's estimated there's nearly gross merchant value or sales on those platforms today approaching $900 billion US. That is twice the size of Amazon. Those businesses are growing above 25% per annum. They're taking market share. Already 15% of total retail volumes in China are done on those 2 platforms. So very, very powerful e-commerce business, but there's much more to Alibaba than purely just e-commerce and these well-known e-commerce platforms that we're interested in. The next would be payments. We've been very interested in payments for a long time, the digitalisation of the payments in economies. They have a 33% stake in Ant Financial, which is the largest digital payments platform in China, and it's much more than just PayPal or Visa or MasterCard. They've got money market funds, they've got insurance platforms, wealth management platforms, and as well as payments. China's got a very high penetration now of digital payments. You can literally use Ant Financial or Alipay as it's known anywhere in China and now in 58 countries around the world. So that's another theme we've been after, but this is the Chinese way of getting it. Another big theme we're after is cloud. The number 1 cloud hosting platform in China is AliCloud, of course owned by Alibaba. We've been very interested in Microsoft and Google who have large Western world cloud platforms, the number one cloud platform in China is owned by Alibaba. And then the last one I would mention here that Alibaba owns is really a platform they're developing for the digitalisation of enterprises. So as we moved through 5G, the Internet of Things, as we start putting smart sensors on many devices around the world, they have a vision with all of their intellectual property to start digitalising physical retailers, digitalising government services, digitalising entire cities, digitalising whole manufacturing processes. And I would argue that that digitalisation of the enterprise in 10 years could potentially be as valuable as the whole of Alibaba is today. And they're well ahead of where the Western world is on the digitalisation of enterprises. So Alibaba's not just about e-commerce. For very, very large growth platforms that they're developing, I would argue that there are maybe 4 incredibly powerful businesses in the world. We've talked about Alphabet many times, which of course owns Google, which has very, very deep intellectual property. Another one is Amazon that we don't own, is a very, very powerful and advantaged company with data and intellectual property, a massive cloud platform. Microsoft, I would argue, is a very, very advantaged company in the world with their cloud platform and their enterprise software businesses. And I now add to that list Alibaba. I would argue that these are the 4 most powerful businesses in the world today, with enormous growth prospects ahead of them. And Alibaba, I'd argue, is today and will be the most important business in China. And the last factor I'd say is, why are we there? Because we believe it's fundamentally cheap and mispriced at the moment.
Thanks, Hamish.
A pleasure, Frank.
And thanks for watching. And as always, feel free to forward this link on to colleagues or clients where you think it might be of interest. Thank you.